All right, welcome everybody to our webinar. I'm so pleased to have you here today. We actually have 19 unique Blues online, and we are looking forward to this conversation. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for download in our resource center. We will have everyone muted during the webinar, but please share your questions throughout in the chat box below, and we'll be sure to address those at the end. My name is Andy Najjar, the Director of Business Development here at Talent Guard. I'm also pleased to introduce you Amy Erickson, a competency consultant that has worked on many BlueCross BlueShield competency projects. Amy, you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Andy. Very excited to be able to spend this time with you.
Well, to start, I wanted to share in an IBM research study that they actually surveyed employees across the globe and found that the #1 reason employees leave organizations is due to a lack of career development. We all know that having a steady supply of employees with the right skills and the right jobs is critical to the success of an organization. Organizations are facing the possibility that a number of employees and tenured leaders may retire or leave. We have had many conversations with a few Blues who are taking the steps to sustain and improve their development of employees. A startling fact that I just read actually was Josh Burson of Deloitte estimates the cost of losing an employee can range from tens of thousands of dollars to 2x the employee's annual salary at any point of time. The goal of this webinar is to review the current practices and share steps necessary to advance career development in your organization, and to ensure the adequate supply of leadership talent over the next 5, 10, or 15 years. So, why do we put this webinar together? To help you. Amy and I have had many conversations with the Blues about improving the employee's career development experience. This helped us gain perspective on the similarities and differences in their approach on employee engagement. So, we actually decided to aggregate our findings and help share them with you to start a broader dialogue that might help you as you begin to tackle employee engagement challenges. So what did we learn? We actually learned a lot. I'm going to share a list of items that many Blues had in common. First, a comprehensive assessment was not available to identify skills and gaps. The assessment process lacked sufficient rigor to support critical talent decisions. Most actually lacked a comprehensive competency model that identified the key practices necessary to achieve business success. Many different definitions of leadership existed, and emphasis was placed on developing random skills and abilities. There was nothing specific. A person viewed as a high potential in one department may not have been the same in another. Managers promoted individuals they knew and had a good relationship with. People were viewing employees through different lenses, causing different opinions of people, capabilities, and potential. In addition, one of the other takeaways that was, one of the biggest Blues takeaways that we had was complex technology environments with multiple technologies and multiple vendors. However, none of the Blues that we actually spoken to had a career pathing technology, even though career development was actually a strategic priority in the organization. And employees were always asking for it. So based on all this information, we've actually simplified the list into 4 core challenges facing the Blues that we worked with or engaged with today. The first one was hiring and retaining the right talent. How do we do that? There was no visibility into skills and gaps, and there was difficulty targeting development at the most critical areas. The fourth one was a constant change in healthcare and insurance industries. The changes were always governmental, regulatory, and there was a lot of advancement in medicine and approaches to treatment plans, which made it very difficult to develop employees. We also found that an example is IT departments in particular were forced to hire extensive contractors because they can't develop talent fast enough. Example, we saw that in cybersecurity. So we've mapped an approach that can help you overcome these challenges and begin deliver an engaging career development process for employees. Now let's dive a little bit deeper. The initial effort should focus on building a common competency framework across your company, including universal definitions of skills and behaviors. Employees need to have a clear definition of the work they do. For example, employees go through key transitions in their careers when they move up or across the organizational ladder. The scope and complexity of work changes at every level, requiring new skills, experiences, qualifications, and work values. So we need to be transparent in what HR and management expects of them. Often, companies employ a consultant to help build or customize a model. Amy and Talent Guard actually have customized several frameworks for Blues, which include Tennessee, New Jersey, and a few more. Several of the companies we worked with adopted the talent frameworks offered by IBM and chose to customize it rather than build one from scratch. The most common frameworks that we usually see are the general corporate functions, insurance, and IT, the combination of the three. What you see on the screen is a preview of those frameworks. It gives you what would be included if you end up purchasing one that will help you kickstart your project. Having a common framework is important beyond having a common definition across the company. It actually enables stronger and more objective discussions of people. Having these skills facilitates better development plans because everyone is actually on the same page. So let's take a deeper look into the benefits of using a common framework internally. The first one is role clarity. It sets the standard for what is expected of the job. Role fit enables employees to match their skills and interests to other jobs. It answers the question, do I fit in this role? Performance standards help them understand the behaviors to be successful. And more development and less budget. Direct employees to relevant and targeted learning rather than just a free-for-all. So now I'm going to actually invite Amy to speak in depth about the competency frameworks and a little bit about her experience on how to use that frameworks internally.
Thanks, Andy, and hi again, everybody. A successful framework consists of not only job and competency content, but also the structure architecture, which ensures adherence to a consistent format. The framework is not a dictionary. It's a model. It's much like a relational database, which links jobs to the competencies at suggested proficiency levels. It associates the competencies to specific learning references and interview questions. An organization must be able to adapt the knowledge and skills of the workforce as changes are forecast or occur. The requirement is for a consistent framework where employees know how to work with and develop competencies, and the competencies are easy to replace. This diagram describes the elements of a job profile, which takes the information that's embedded in a traditional job description, such as responsibilities, knowledge, skills, and abilities, and expresses them through creating discrete objects which can be shared across the organization. So in addition to the critical responsibilities for the job, is a set of competencies or skills which are needed to carry out those responsibilities. Those competencies will clearly define the level of knowledge, skills, and abilities required for the job, and will cover different types. There may be core competencies, which apply to every job in the organization, leadership competencies, which may apply to only certain levels, and function or job-specific competencies, which speaks to the technical expertise required. Each competency, regardless of type, will have the same format. Competency is defined by proficiency levels with behavioral descriptors against which an assessment can be performed. And it's these different proficiency levels and behavioral statements which enables the company to be enables a competency, to be shared between, for example, a team lead and a senior manager. There are also goal statements and coaching tips which provide languages for the manager to use, and sample interview questions which can be incorporated into the recruiting function. And last but not least, a list of learning references, again, specific to the competency, which can be used by the manager and staff member to create a development plan for any knowledge gaps. This format for a job description transforms a traditional, static Word document into a living, breathing, adaptable information bank, which can be used by many functions and layers of the organization and will evolve with the company's changing requirements. Now on the next slide, I'll lay out a process by which you can transform and rationalize the job titles. The first, as Andy had mentioned, is establish a consistent job architecture. And I'm going to amend that next sub-bullet where it says seriously consider an off-the-shelf framework to purchase an off-the-shelf framework. There is no need to start from scratch. This will greatly speed the project along and facilitate it. Next, particularly if you are decentralized, create a function chart for the organization. Now, this is not a reporting structure. It will be an exercise of grouping like jobs together regardless of where they report into. So there's some examples of the functions mentioned here. Generate a list of all jobs and related information from your HRIS system. Just take a dump. And then map the jobs to the functions. If a goal is to reduce the number of job titles, which may be due to legacy titles or perhaps creative naming by certain department heads in your organization, you will begin to identify the functions with the longest list of job titles and can start to compare them side by side to discover duplicate jobs with different titles and bring them together under one name. I want to stress this is not eliminating jobs. It's about simplifying the job structure. Another approach with which I'm working with the Blue is to map the company jobs to the closest jobs in the purchase framework. We will then see how many job titles from the organization will map into the same framework job and discover which jobs are the same, but again, with different titles. So that's just a different approach. On the next slide, I'll explain a method by which to select competencies for the jobs. Once the job is identified, the challenge is to build out the profile. A framework will help by providing a job profile for most jobs for each function. This will consist of a set of competencies most often associated with a particular job. The framework, however, does not know your particular company, does not know the specific strategies, challenges, and opportunities that are being faced. So the next step is to select the competencies which will map directly back to the business needs of the organization. That selection is what makes your strategic job competency model different than your competitors. The competencies should all tie back directly to support a competitive advantage. To that end, the organization can select critical leadership and core competencies which will communicate to the employees what skills and abilities are required to realize the organizational strategy. This competency selection will help to build job profile templates. And on the next slide, I'll show you an example of a template. The purpose of this exercise is to provide a clear and consistent view, not only into a specific job, but also into that next job. The competencies become the common denominator through which the organization can describe a job, can identify the knowledge possessed by an individual, the skills needed for a project and therefore needed to be represented in a project team, etc. To illustrate an issue which is facing the healthcare and insurance industries now, obviously, is to acknowledge that speed of change is rapid. An organization requires not only people who are adaptable and can make decisions in a constantly changing environment, but also a talent model which can also incorporate and support those changes easily. So if we're to look at speed of change, then as an issue, then a shared leadership competency may be managing organizational change or healthcare trends and analysis or innovation. Individual contributors may share core competencies of adaptability and flexibility or judgment and decision making. It's these selection of competencies that are linked to jobs based on addressing the business needs and challenges of the organization and industry trends. Leaders' profiles will consist of a standard set of leadership competencies pertaining to running the organization. All job profiles, regardless of level, will also consist of a set of core competencies which support items in the organization such as values or culture. And each job within a particular function can also have a set of core competencies, core function competencies. And then it is at the job-specific or technical knowledge level required that we add on those specific competencies. Many of the competencies will be shared, but at different levels of proficiency required depending on the level of the job. For example, a team lead may share the same competency as a senior manager, but the level of proficiency expected will differentiate the scope of the job's responsibilities. It will also begin to prepare the team lead for future leadership positions by beginning to develop that competency. So this enables the incumbent to ask not only what is the knowledge required for my job, but also what is the knowledge required for that next job, and they can begin to develop towards it. Even if similar jobs report into different areas of the organization, by defining the competencies needed to be, for example, a project manager, the organization is supporting the chosen profession of the incumbent. And by that, I mean you're bringing together the best practices of project management reflected through competencies. And regardless, again, of the function they're supporting, you can add in domain-specific knowledge, which can be assigned in the addition of those technical competencies. So to recap, the leadership competencies assigned to all leader jobs, which fall between bands X, Y, Z. Core competencies, which are assigned to all jobs at different proficiency levels. The core functional competencies, which are assigned to all jobs which support a particular function. And then the job-specific or domain knowledge that are needed. These are the variable competencies that get assigned based on specific job knowledge requirements. So what's the payback for investing time and money into transforming jobs, how jobs are defined? The next slide provides some rather stark clues. This is some data that we've seen through IBM and Aberdeen Research Group. You can see in terms of the statistics which address the cost of a bad hire or low employee engagement, loss of a high potential, as well as the benefits of increased retention and employee performance. And I think it's the remarkable statistic that Andy spoke of, where Burson said it's tens of thousands of dollars or 2 times an employee's salary when you need to replace a high potential. So I'm going to, Andy, I'm going to turn this back over to you, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. All right. Moving along, so let's talk about how has Talent Guard helped. Most companies conducted performance assessments, but they were not rigorous. The assessments evaluated basic competencies like respect, professionalism, and a few other ones. Development, promotion, and succession decisions were not subjective. Some Blues we talked to actually considered outside firms to supplement the assessment process with like a psychological or personality assessment. But we need to do a better job. A rigorous assessment process involves assessing employees against a common culture, competencies, and job-specific competencies. Socializing the assessment allows others to provide feedback on employee skills so that management can actually have a more objective input. You must allow employees to add additional skills that are beyond the scope of their job role so that you have a holistic view of all of the employees' talents. Let's take a look at what that might look like actually. In this view, employees are able to assess their job-based skills by proficiency level. This program was configured to actually support the IBM frameworks. So you can see we have skill areas, which is personal effectiveness, component skills such as adaptability and initiating action, and we're actually using a 3-level proficiency, basic, fully, and outstanding. Under each level, the employee is able to assess against individual behaviors. You could also configure the program to assess based on skill areas like personal effectiveness or component skills. In this second view, we can allow managers to actually see how employees have assessed, how it compares to the manager's assessment, where they stand compared to the HR expectations. And you can see that icon here on the right side with a target mark actually shows where the recommendations are from the IBM framework. You can also see social endorsements on the left that show employees that gotten further feedback from other people in the organization. Once the competency model is in place and employees have assessed their skills, we can actually begin to look forward at career development. Employees now understand current job expectations and can use that assessment data to compare themselves to any other job in your company. This serves as a foundation of career development and career pathing. This also helps managers gain visibility into employee strengths, weaknesses, career aspirations. Managers can now have directed coaching exchanges and career conversations with their individuals and their team. Looking at this, when an employee compares their assessment to a job, it produces a gap report. So in this gap report, you can see employees can see an overall fit percentage and review how they match against their skills, experiences, qualifications, and preference. They can also learn more about the role by viewing videos, seeing what other employees say about the role, and also looking at a detailed description. Employees can also build out a short and long-term career journey. They now have a visual way to show how they can move from one job opportunity to the next. They can see gaps, match percentages, vacancies, and even when a role is actually a critical role. They can see who else is in the role for mentorship. So as employees begin to express career aspirations, our system can automatically recommend targeted development plans. These development plans can link to a variety of learning resources in your learning management system, coaching tips, interview question guides, and much more. Managers, employees, and others can all provide feedback on goals to support the learning process. So here's an example that shows you how a development option can recommended based on skill areas. So here you'll see by selecting the skill, you are served up with development recommendations for that skill. You can assign the development options to yourself as an employee. Once you do that, you can actually now track all of your goals in one single location and the attainment of those goals. This helps the organizations see how employees are progressing, gaining new skills, and other things as well, like having the ability to solicit 360 feedback on coaching and mentoring goals. Lastly, one of the most important pieces is creating an effective change management process or communication plan. I cannot stress this enough. Employees and managers must be educated and trained on the entire process. Lots of materials need to be created that support the introduction of the new program. Some tips to making it successful is having an internal key stakeholder with tremendous credibility communicate the information. Usually not an HR leader. So let's discuss how does career development fit within BlueCross BlueShield organizational structures. Every organization will have an HRIS system that houses all employee data, an ATS system that captures all external candidates interested in a current position, and a learning management system that houses learning and development content for employees to take. Career pathing will get any employee data from the HRS system, assess employees, and recommend development options and training based on skill gaps that will be completed in the learning management tool. Lastly, notifying employees of any openings that align with their current career aspirations, thus closing the loop and supporting the 3 tools that you have today. After rollout, some key outcomes that you can measure for the career pathing program. They fall into 2 categories. Employee now can identify their skill gaps. They know how to improve employee engagement or have employee engagement, and they have improved employee satisfaction along with, was the process easy? For managers, they can see team skills and competencies, having the ability to have better conversation with their employees, and being able to build a better bench for their teams. And then lastly, having the ability to use competencies to hire better candidates. And that's what you're looking for. With a successful execution of this project, you can expect some key impacts like improved curated conversations, engagement scores, and turnover reduction. So this is a little bit of the information and data that we've gathered from some of the projects that we've done. Ending with a summary, Talent Guide provides a wide selection of products that align with a competency-focused strategy, from performance processes to 360 assessments, succession planning, and much more. With that note, I would like to end allowing time for questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask those right in the comment box. And let me check here. And Amy, it looks like there's one question that came in that is, we have a mess of jobs throughout the organization. It seems impossible to make any headway. Where do we start?
Good question. And the first thing is to take a deep breath. There are really 4 key elements to creating a successful competency model within an organization. I'm going to be repeating myself here, but really content, trying to write competencies or write competencies on your own. It will take too long and the project will die of its own weight. You'll also be stressing out the subject matter experts you'll need to be able to create those competencies. So purchase one that already has competencies defined. You'll have most of your needs in that framework if it's a good framework, and then you'll bring the 10-20% of the strategic knowledge that's needed to really select out those competencies to make it pertinent to the issues that your organization is facing. So content is one. The second one you've heard us say over and over again is architecture. It has to be consistently defined. If they're created in discrete objects that all have the same format, you can then plug and play the information and it will, quote, fit within that architecture. The next thing is to have a method or process by which you're going to move forward through the competencies and the jobs. Now, if you have a suspicion that you have multiple job titles for the same job throughout the organization, reporting into different places, again, export the jobs from your HRIS system, the job titles, you can start doing searches on things like sales or project management, and as a first cut, pull all those jobs that may have those keywords in the job title and map them to the function that they would normally support. Now, it's important, the function and not the division. And then map it to your framework. Map each one of those job titles to your framework. See which ones map into the same job, and then create the competency of the job profile that's suggested of that job that's in the framework. You don't need to tackle the entire organization at once. So take a test function, for example, project management, or claims might be a little bigger, but you may have project managers throughout the organization. So bring those job titles together, compare them, really get rid of the duplicates. Again, you're not getting rid of jobs, you're getting rid of extraneous job titles, and select those competencies that are going to support, again, those professional job of project manager. That will help to incorporate the best practices for that particular function. They can go back and report out to the other organizations where they are now. If you're decentralized, you just need to look at some of the technical or domain-specific knowledge that area might require. But the key thing is, if you do a function like project management, you then can get something developed quickly because you're really constraining you're really scoping it to something that's manageable and that you can turn out quickly. It becomes sort of your internal sales tool as you move through the organization. You no longer, as I'm doing, kind of waving my arms trying to explain this to you, you can actually point to, here's a senior project manager, here's a project administrator, these are the competencies that they share, this is how you may grow from one job into the next. And oh, by the way, it's okay if you want to be the project manager over in claims. These are the 2 or 3 domain knowledge that you'll need to add on in addition to your project management skills. So I guess to recap and to make it a little shorter is, make sure that you've got support through the content and architecture. Develop a process which will allow you to crank out deliverables quickly, so that people don't lose interest and you can build momentum and excitement. And then you need the technology to be able to support that content that you're putting together. So I'll turn that and take a chunk that you can get done quickly and use as an internal sales tool.
And Amy, we have actually a few more questions here coming through, and I think I can combine 2 of them together. One question is, do the job descriptions need to be rewritten, and what's the length to implement a 5,000 employee company? And then the other one is, how long does it take to do it right? So we can actually combine those 2 together. So maybe you can tackle that one as well.
I'll try. I'm afraid it's always it depends. It depends on the shape of the jobs, on how well structured your organization is now and how comfortable you are with that. We typically, for the first function, it's going to depend on how quickly you can marshal the resources. It's going to depend on how well your framework supports the jobs. Now, in the IBM framework, which I'm a little more familiar with, they have already outlined jobs and typical 4 of the critical job responsibilities. So you can either accept the job responsibilities come in the framework. Often it will be a combination of what's in the framework tailored with specific requirements that you have in your already written job descriptions. So it provides a structure, it provides some of the language. You may want to tailor it, again, to fit your particular situation. again, that's going to vary from function to function, from job to job, and which approach you take. So I'm hedging on the length of time because if you take one function and run through that, that could take 6 weeks, 2 months. It depends how quickly you can implement the processes and get your subject matter experts together to confirm the job profiles that you've come up with. After that, you've got some processes that are sort of hard-baked. They've been time-tested so that you can then start rolling through the other functions, and it happens much more quickly. I've seen competency projects that have a lot of resources, HR business partners helping, that can be done in 6 months. I've seen skills inventories for IT that can be turned around in a month, but it all depends on the state of your jobs, the objectives of why you're doing it, and the resources that are available to you. I'm hoping that wasn't too hedged, but I'd be happy to discuss any specific organization at another time.
Yeah, and what I can add to that as well is there's actually 2 pieces to the project. There's obviously the data, making sure that your job roles and competencies are in line. Using a framework, actually IBM has one of the most comprehensive insurance ones, and usually that shortens the project quite a bit. I mean, usually we see if you were to create that structure yourself, it's like years, versus with IBM, you have a really good starting point, so you can narrow that down to months. The other thing that is important too is the software piece. So after you finish your framework discussions and working through that, is how long does software take? So software usually takes, our average is about 12 weeks from the time of readiness of the data. And then after that, we can launch into either specific divisions, or we can do the entire organization. It really depends. We've had some Blues that decided that they want to do full boat, all divisions, others that want to do a rollout of various divisions one at a time. And we're happy to explore that depending on what makes the most sense. The other question that I have here is, with regards to, does the system need integrations? We definitely see integration as one of the pieces. So with HRIS data, a lot of the employee data is in the HRIS system. So there's 2 ways we could really do that. We can either have an integration directly with the HRIS system. For example, today we're integrated with ADP and Workday, or we can also do an FTP file transfer with any other HRIS system that is not real-time integrations. And that's basically just scheduling a file that will automatically update the database maybe once a day or twice a day, depending on how frequent of changes do you have. And then lastly is cost structure. Cost structure happens by number of employees. So the more employees that are actually part of the scope of the project, the lower the cost per employee. So that's how we kind of scale that. We're happy to pair you up with a representative that could maybe help you with from a pricing perspective. I have one last question here that says, what if I already have some competencies that I already started with? How do I get started with career pathing? We don't really have to have the framework. It's definitely better if you have one because it sets you up for success. But if you have a different framework, whether it's IBM or a different option, we can actually take that data and actually put it into the software and have that as a starting point. So that's really just a preference, but at the same time, we definitely stress on the importance of a framework, because if you don't have that, that definitely, is important for the success of the project. I always say with software, the success of the project is with successful data. What you put into software is what makes it successful, not just the software itself. All right. Well, that looks like answers all of our questions. Amy, thank you very much for your time today, and thanks everybody for joining. We're excited to have you as part of this conversation. And if you have any further questions, we're happy to answer those. This webinar recording will be sent out to all of the attendees, so you'll have a copy of that. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Amy or myself directly, and we're happy to answer those. Thank you very much, everybody.